know that how AMU is doing this work of greening the campus. So it is very heartening to note that such a topic is being taken up for the faculty development program. First of all, my congratulations to the university as well as to the department, and also especially Dr. Muhammad Rehan. So let me just, I have seen the topics and they are very relevant. The entire 5 days are jam-packed, and you will have a great enlightening 5-day program which will train you into both sustainability as well as the green energy. I've seen that they've taken technical topics. They have also taken people from the social sciences who will be talking about the socio-economic aspects of these topics. So my talk today will be focused on, first of all, I will be talking about what are the global challenges in sustainability, like, climate change, air pollution, water pollution. I will touch these topics, and then I will go on to history of sustainable development, introduction to sustainable development, and then we will talk about principles of sustainability, like, what are the 6 principles of sustainability, and then the sustainable development goals, and what are their relevance to the energy professionals, to the faculty who is teaching in various universities, etc. So nobody is unaware of these challenges that we are facing right now. Climate change and disasters, I will be covering some. I have some data to show you in a few minutes times from now, but this is climate change is a big issue. Whether we accept or do not accept it, it has taken a toll on our lives, and lot of disasters that we have seen in the last century. Somewhere there are earthquakes, floods. Right now when I'm speaking, there are many states who are dealing with the floods. There are states who are dealing with the earthquakes. So we have to, keep cognizance of all these disasters that are happening around the world right now. Food and nutritional security is a problem. We have seen that, many of our people are living in a near hunger scenario in African nations. Many rural communities do not have access to food. In fact, in urban communities, food is accessible, but we are not aware how to consume it. What is the right kind of food for us? So there is lot of diversity, gender-wise and otherwise, community-wise. So these issues have taken a toll. Energy security, I will not talk about much. I will not talk much about this because I see that most of you are from this field. And there is many of the world's poor do not have access to energy. In fact, in India also, when a few years back I was in Odisha and Jharkhand, very surprised to find that these tribal areas did not have access to energy. Other resources are getting scarce. Maybe it is oceanic resources or products which come from sea and other areas. Air pollution, I do not have to tell you, Chennai and Delhi, we have, all the metro cities, they have seen humongous air pollution, and people are suffering from breathing and other ailments because of this pollution. Health and nutrition, yes, I will be sharing some data. Then water availability and quality is one of the issue. Mobility, which has become a crisis during COVID-19. So mobility is an issue. If you move right now, when metro was not working, when buses were not operating or vehicles were not operating, you will find a clean Delhi. But this is not the solution. Today metro has opened in Delhi, and we have to move from one place to another. They say that COVID-19 has reduced the fossil fuel consumption across the world because people are not moving. But this, but COVID-19 has also hampered so many processes. So this is not the solution. So we will discuss this issue as well. Economic recession is one of the challenges that globe is facing.
शुरू हो गया
Almost
इसको कैसे बंद करें
almost every country is facing
वो कैसे बंद करें
almost every. I have a disturbance from, yeah. So almost every country is facing economic recession. Then access to education. Access to education is also. I request all of you, please put your phones on the mute.
कौन सा काम है मेरा तो माइक्रोफोन वगैरह हाँ माइक्रोफोन लगाओ
Okay, so access to education. I think Shahla Yasmin ji, please put your phone on. Shahla Yasmin ji, please put your phone on mute. Okay, so there is a problem of economic recession every country is dealing with, and then access to education. Many of the poor across the world, they do not have access to education. And now the biggest crisis of this century is COVID-19. It has put our lives to standstill, right? So these are the challenges. It has put all the sustainable development work to a stall. It has aggravated the already happening crisis across the world. So that is how these are some of the challenges. So if we talk about some of the climate events from last decades, you will find that Amazon forest fires, they have done a lot of devastation. Australian forest fires in 2019. We all saw how loss of habitat and biodiversity happened. A few years back, Nepal earthquake happened. And then we have also seen, if we go back a few years, we saw floods in Kashmir and Uttarakhand, our very own Himalayan states. So what we are talking right now is that there is, all the ecosystems have become so fragile, whether it is forest in Australia and Amazon, or it is the Himalayan ecosystem, and we talk about Uttarakhand and Kashmir. And in the urban areas, Delhi is dealing with its own air pollution, and China is dealing with its own crisis. And everybody is aware of the water crisis we had in Chennai. So if we see the aggravation of these facts, if we see how much devastation has been caused, you will find that 3,000 homes have been destroyed, 7.3 million hectares have been burned across Australia's 6 states, 500 million animals have been affected by the fires across New South Wales, with million likely dead. So there's a lot of devastation that has happened in terms of flora and fauna. Almost a third of total koalas in New South Wales may have been killed in the fires, it is estimated, right? Reptiles, birds. So all these point to an economic loss of $110 billion. Whether we lose flora, fauna, humankind, whether it is our health which is being impacted, all this gets translated into economic damage. So we have to spend more to keep the people healthy. We have to spend more to maintain the ecosystems. So all this, I'm trying to tell you that how environment, economy, as well as the social development are related. These are the 3 pillars of sustainable development. So if there is an environmental loss, if there is biodiversity loss, we have to spend more money to maintain that ecosystem, to restore that ecosystem. So that is how, lot of total damage. So one pillar falls onto another. So if economic damage is there, of course, we will not be able to invest in environment, and society will also be impacted. So all these three things are related. Insurance losses in Australia are estimated at 485 million, and many industries, including the tourism industry, will be hit. Amazon also, we have, almost similar kind of story to tell. Deforestation, and the 60% of Amazon basin is located within Brazil, and we all have seen how Amazon, got destroyed. Now, this is some data about share of cumulative carbon emissions by geographic region. If you see two graphs, from 1850 to 1990 and 1850 to 215, 17, you will find that earlier Europe and United States, which were the developing country, were contributing to the more carbon emissions. But during, as we approach towards 217, and this trend continues till 2020, we find that India and China are contributing more to the emissions, and rest of the world is also contributing more, whereas emissions coming from Europe and United States are declining. I'm not saying that emissions, we are contributing to the more emissions. Europe and United States are also doing the same, but at least it is lesser than their previous emissions, where India and China were lesser. So that is, emissions also happen because of the development. As we become more developed, we use more resources, and that's how carbon emissions are there. So this is annual CO2 emissions by geographic region. I have this data 2017, and this comes from Institute for Economic Policy Research at Stanford University. You will find how India and China are progressing and rest of the world are progressing, whereas in case of Europe it is declining and United States is more or less stabilizing. I move to my next graph, and historical and projected annual global GHG emissions under selected policy scenarios. Now, we have different scenarios. If we have this, 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway, 2 degrees Celsius pathway, and if we do not change our policies, then this is the purple graph that is going upwards towards 2100, and this is amount in billions of tons. So this graph suggests that we have to take action. All the countries have to take action in terms of climate policies. If we don't do that, then the problem will be aggravated. So if we take action in different scenarios, then obviously we will be able to curtail our emissions. Now, so we have this data about the climate change. We have 10 years to halve global greenhouse gas emissions and keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Many of us would be aware that it is only the 4 industries who remain responsible for majority of global emissions: electricity and heating, transportation, agriculture and forestry, and manufacturing and construction. They contribute to 80% of our global carbon emissions. The GHG emissions. Atmospheric concentration of GHG emissions have climbed to record highs, and low carbon, if we try to maintain this to a low carbon economy, we need around $1 trillion of investment each year. So that means we were not thinking about all this 100 years back. We were developing unsustainably. I mean, I'm not talking about poor countries, the developing countries, but the developed countries, they had unsustainable models in place. And very simple example, if we go to Europe and USA, you will find that even in their bathrooms, toilets, etc., they will have all 24 hours running geysers, and they will have heaters placed there. So our consumption is actually much lower. It is actually the population pressure, that counts for these emissions, right? And they have to grow. So we need around $1 billion of investment each year, and there will be increased climate risks, as has been also stated in international IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change report, IPCC, that we would need money for the strategic adaptation measures, including early warning systems, climate resilient infrastructure and dryland, and more resilient potable water sources. And if we take measures that could save us $7.1 trillion, and warmth between 1.5 to 2% will lead to substantial increase in the population. Now, we have already discussed about the disasters. I will skip this slide. This is a graph for US economic damages from climate change in 2080. This is a future projection, like how will US have to deal with the climate change by 2080 if temperature increases in degrees Celsius. So you can see that if temperature increases, more economic damages will happen to US economy. So I think we have to understand this is the climate change effect on per capita GDP in 2100. So say around 80 years from now, we can see that this will be these are the regions, the red regions. This will be percent change in per capita GDP in 2100. So most of the Africa lies in this. So poor will be more vulnerable. Poor continents, developing countries, and even amongst those developing countries, the poor communities will be more. This is the mortality impacts from climate change in 2100 by region. You can see that we will have more mortality because that will come from more ailments, health issues, malnutrition issues, hunger issues. Because all these issues also fall into social displacement, climate migration will be there, people will be deprived of resources. So all this points towards greater mortality. We have seen that one COVID-19 has caused millions of deaths across the world. Even in India, we have thousands of deaths in our home country. So that's how, if one small disaster, if there is a flood, people will be displaced. Half of them will die in floods, half of them will die, by the aftermaths of these floods. So this is the kind of situation. And climate change and health, because see, if climate changes, food productivity will be low, water scarcity will be there, water will be less available, and then even water quality is an issue, right? So water scarcity encourages people to transport water from long distances and store supplies in their homes. This can increase the risk of household water contamination, causing illness. Climate conditions affect diseases, which transmitted through water. If I talk about rising number of waterborne diseases, typhoid, other waterborne diseases. So it is because of the water contamination and huge population pressure to the urban areas, and diarrhea, malaria, and malnutrition. They have caused lot of havoc in a city like Delhi. And if you talk about other continents, Africa, etc., the situation is still very grave. Now, if I talk about climate change and food security, you will notice that more, a change in the rainfall pattern. Sometimes there are floods, sometimes there is excessive rainfall, there are droughts, and their frequency and severity. There is heat stress, Ola is there, like, so sometimes we have these, tsunamis and frost issues. So all these are putting pressure on our agriculture system as well. And if we talk about food, water, energy nexus, all these three resources are also related, because if we need more water, we will have to spend more energy, right? And if we need more food, more water will be needed. So all these issues are related, interwoven, are complex in nature. So we have to control all this. Agriculture, forestry, and other types of land use account for 23% of human greenhouse gas emissions. And degradation has become one of the issues, wasteland and all, because of which, lot of land is, rendered unproductive, and that is also going to aggravate the issues of hunger. The recent 2020 report released by FAO and IFAD, it tells you that number of people affected by hunger globally has been slowly on the rise since 2014. So from 2014 till 2020, people who are hungry, it has been on the rise slowly. So slowly means that, this rate of growth is slow, but in the coming years, we will find a faster rate of growth of hunger. And this is also aggravated by the COVID-19 situation. Around 690 million people are hungry. See, these figures look very great, because we think that, living in urban areas, we don't know that there could be some people who are hungry also. Simply speaking, in developing countries, food is wasted at the supply chain level, at the production level. 40% of our food is wasted at the supply chain level. Only 60% is accessible to consumers. But if you go to developed countries, you will find that 40% is wasted at the consumer level. Their supply chains are more efficient, so they don't know how to manage. Consumers waste more food. So exactly the same amount of food is wasted, but the ends are different where this is actually wasted. So 690 million people are hungry, which is 8.9% of the world population, up by 10 million people in 1 year and by nearly 60 million in 5 years. This is 2020 data. The number of people affected by severe food insecurity shows a similar upward trend. In 2019, close to 750 million, or nearly 1 in 10 people would suffer, right? So 2 billion people in the world did not have access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food in 2019. COVID-19 pandemic will actually add 83 and 132 million people in the total number of undernourished in the world in 2020, depending on economic growth scenario. So you notice that COVID-19 is bringing more challenges. So in 2019, we can see that, the recent data suggests that 21.3% of children under 5 years of age were stunted, 6.9% and 5.6% overweight. So on one hand, we have 21% of children who are stunted, who do not have access to right kind of food. But on the other hand, there are people who are facing the problem of obesity and overweight. So problems at both the ends. Healthy diets are unaffordable for more than 3 billion people in the world. Healthy diets are said to be 5 times more expensive than diets that meet only dietary energy needs. And after COVID-19 pandemic, you would have also observed that food inflation has increased. It is because of the issues at the field level, at the supply chain level. Diet-related health costs are also increasing. If we have more ailments, more countries, governments, state government, central government will have to spend more. So these are the issues that we are facing. This is some data about the land use and observed climate change. So you know that agricultural production scenario, food demand is increasing, agricultural production is not increasing at that rate, and then we have problem of desertification and land degradation. This is again, risks to humans and ecosystems from changes in land-based processes as a result of climate change. I will quickly skip this data to address the issue of energy security. So we know that energy is not accessible to all. So there are stark differences in fossil fuel consumption, and what we call in the world, this phenomenon is called energy divide across the global East, Asia Pacific, Africa, and the Middle East, and the global West, right? So there is an energy divide. There are these three continents like Americas, Europe, and Eurasia. They are having access to energy, whereas Asia Pacific, Africa, and Middle East is still deprived of, communities are deprived of energy. Apart from natural gas, fossil fuel demand is expected to decline in the West from 2018 and 2040. If we see the developing countries, say for example, global East, demand for coal, oil, natural gas will increase. It is because of the fact that as the development happens, demand for fossil fuel will grow. So we are going to see entirely different patterns shift in the energy demand. And also notice that COVID-19 has brought additional challenges in terms of if there is no mobility, fossil fuel consumption is decreasing. Because since last 4 months we have been sitting at home, factories were not producing, so factories were not operational. So this is how COVID-19 has brought different shift to this energy scenario. Mamta Jadwani ji, please you mute yourself. Mamta Jadwani ji, please mute yourself. Okay. So we know that solar power has grown. Around 2008, in 2008, the share of solar power was in the total global energy consumption was 0.01%, and it has increased to 2% in 2018. We see no rise in solar energy coming years. By 2040, multiple scenarios project that solar will provide over 20% of the world's electricity, which is, I think, a good sign. Now, the global economy has been shaken deeply by COVID-19. We know that fossil fuel demand has declined. Mamta Jadwani ji, please unmute yourself. Yeah. So, okay. So, short-term demand has declined for fossil fuels after COVID-19. And if we see the scenario predicted by International Energy Agency, that has estimated okay, fine. I think the host has to take call. You have to meet these people. This lady called Mamta Jadwani. Madam, please mute yourself. Okay. So now it's fine. The International Energy Agency estimates that primary energy demand in 2020 could decline for oil to 9%, coal 8%, natural gas 5%, and nuclear 2%, while the renewables would grow by 1%, right? So this is just a signal that after COVID-19, there is only a short-term decline to the energy demand. But after COVID disappears, we all hope that it disappears in 2021 as soon as possible. Then, the energy demand will in fact rise. Travel activity is no more there. So all these things we have to take into account. Now, there are a few figures about global challenges. I would say that I would skip these slides to tell you that total freshwater ecosystems are also on, the water level is declining. So this is the freshwater resources we have in India. And yesterday I was reading one report where it was written that ice has disappeared from this planet. So this is something that is very much stuck, and we all have to worry about all these things. And more population growth will require more water. We will require more energy, we will require more water. So, all these food, water and energy are actually interconnected. Water quality, the quality of water determines suitability for human consumption. Quality of water also has declined. Groundwater contamination and presence of geogenic contaminants such as arsenic, fluoride. If you see this entire GT road belt, which starts from Delhi to Lahore, we have a lot of cotton and rice cultivation is done. They've used a lot of pesticides, and there it has been an increase in the incidence of cancer. And because of the heavy metal contamination in water, the water is rendered, not useful for consumption. So this is how the pollutants that have emerged in water, heavy metals, pesticides, etc. They have taken a toll on our health, because water, these pesticides, if they do not get degraded, they seep through the water and reach our food chain, and then through the problem of bioaccumulation, they impact our health. So you will find that even heavy metal contamination is there in the entire region. So this is about the scenario of all the resources we have seen. And I have not discussed the issue of waste management. You know that how we have lot of waste in terms of nuclear waste, we have plastic waste, we have food waste. So all this waste remains unmanageable. That causes lot of problems. Plastics, they have gone under sea, and they are threatening the lives of sea organisms. So this is how these problems are very much aggravated. Now let me go back to the history of sustainable development. Now, why am I talking about resource scarcity, resource contamination? Why am I talking about waste, water, food, energy? Because if we do not use these resources judiciously, we are going to suffer. One resource will fall upon, the availability of one resource will fall upon the other. I will give you a simple example of a cement company. They were working in Rajasthan, and I will not name that company. They were working in Rajasthan, and they found that there was no water to run their plant. Some 5 to 6 years back, and if there is no water, then how will they operate? But they never thought that how freely they were using water. They thought that this water is available to them, and there is already a water scarce region, the Rajasthan. And what happened was, they found that there is no water to run their plant, and if there is no water, people also fled that place. Labor problem originated because labor had moved on, because if there is no water, nobody will be able to live. So labor also became costlier. So in fact, because of their own operations, they impacted that region. And that ultimately they had to pay the cost. Now they have they have taken initiative to develop that area. Later on, they strategized, and they used a lot of biodiversity eco restoration strategies in that area. Even water table is now coming back to the level, but they had not realized it some 20-30 years back, when they were using that water unjudiciously, because it was available free to them. So companies, governments, even citizens, we have to be we have to see the actual judicious use of resources. Now, sustainable development. We know that it all started from the book by Rachel Carson, The Silent Spring, in 1962. Until then, we have been raising lot of issues about climate change, about pollution, whether it is air pollution or water pollution. We have seen that due to a pesticide leak, methyl isocyanate, which was used to manufacture the carbonyl pesticide. There was Bhopal tragedy. There was drought in Ethiopia. So all that led to the world thinking about this problem, the sustainable development, and the word sustainable development was coined by coined first time in Brundtland report, that is release of our common future in 1987. So Lady Brundtland was heading this Brundtland Commission, and they released this report of our common future, where sustainable development was defined for the first time. And later, IPCC was formed, Business Council for Sustainable Development, Earth Summit, first meeting of UN Commission on Sustainable Development, and other initiatives were taken. Then came ISO 14001, and amidst that, we had a lot of financial crisis, climate change issues, and yes, Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes. So even companies are now bound to they are assessed not only on their financial performance, but also on their environmental and social performance. And investors are not investing in these companies who are unsustainable. So that's how companies get listed on Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes. If a company is listed in this index, it will show that how a company is not only economically performing, but also how it is environmentally and socially performing. So listing of the company started because investors, as an investor, I will not invest in a company which is not green, because you have seen the recent Volkswagen scandal. One wrong decision about the pollution management, one wrong company policy, and entire company has come to a halt. So how shareholders lost their value, the investors lost their money, and other stakeholders suffered, and the loss to a brand name. So we can easily see that even investors are not investing in a company which is not adopting sustainability strategies. right? So then we had Millennium Development Goals, GRI, Kyoto Protocols,
నేను ఇందులో ఉంది సార్ ఇది
etc. So
Ravindra Soni
what I'm
మాట్లాడుతున్నాడు
trying to
దీని
tell you is that then Rio Plus 20 summit was there, Copenhagen climate negotiations. I'm not covering this history in detail. And after 2012, I have discussed all the climate change issues in the beginning.
మరి ఇందులో
So
మొన్న
rest is given in the history. Now, what is sustainable development? Sustainable development means different people, but the definition that was used by Brundtland report was that a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations. So we should not be worried about our generation, how we eat, how we consume resources, how we use fossil fuel, how we use all these water, how we use these resources, but we should also be worried about the future generations to meet their own needs, right? So here we have two major concepts. First is the concept of needs, in particular the essential need of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given. And then what ancestors imagine what we would be needing? No. Even we also don't know what our future generations need. But today we can use our resources judiciously, right? And then the idea of limitations imposed by state of technology and social organization on environmental's ability to meet present and future needs. So right now, companies, citizens need to use resources judiciously, and government needs to make policies so that we can save for our future generations. So these are the three components I've already discussed in sustainable development, and we are aware, so I'm just skipping this. Now, there are certain myths about sustainable development. So we say that, these are the poor people, they are unaware about resources, and we hold poor responsible for all this environmental degradation, whereas this is not the case. Poor, in order to raise them from their level, we need certain resources, right? So this is the myth. Most environmental degradation is caused by the poor. Developed countries, they blame developing countries for the emissions, right? Poverty reduction necessarily leads to environmental degradation, right? So this is also a myth. How it is a myth? If we try to reduce poverty by sustainable means, that is what is called sustainable development. We do not have to emulate the models that were followed by West, which were mainly unsustainable. They did not care about the rest of the world. So we have to follow the business models, models that are more suited for our business. We do not have to follow the models that were adopted by the West, because these have led to a lot of unsustainable development. So we can reduce poverty through sustainable business models. That is, against the myth is that poverty reduction necessarily leads to environmental degradation. Shama Prasad ji, please mute yourself. Shama Prasad ji. Shama Prasad ji, please mute yourself.
Please mute all the participants' audio, sir, from your end.
Can I request the host to please mute them? Okay, so population growth necessarily leads to
Was the host to mute The audio of all the participants, please.
headphones నా phone
Okay. So
I request all the
population growth,
participants to please mute your mics. Don't open it.
I would
We have all-
request you to please mute yourself.
देव फोन दे देव माँ हेलो
Okay, so population growth necessarily leads to environmental degradation. The poor are too poor to invest in the environment. See, poor are not aware, but they can be taught. They actually are more environment friendly. If you go to Uttarakhand, Sikkim, you will find they don't use any pesticides. Their farming is by default organic. So I'm trying to tell you that it is a myth that the poor are too poor to invest in environment. You poor have that indigenous knowledge that can be used. It is only that we have to tap that knowledge, and we have to invest in them, in building their knowledge, how they can actually become sustainable. Okay, poor people lack the technical resource for technical knowledge for resource management. So that's the point I was trying to make, that they have more knowledge than us. They don't know about pesticides. They do all, by default and organic farming and all. And then, these determinants of sustainable development. One is the consumption related issues. Like we can make our supply chain very efficient. We can reduce waste, food waste, other things. But it is, economic efficiencies alone cannot manage the natural resources with the current consumption patterns. We are not only producing unsustainably, we are also consuming unsustainably. Whatever we are consuming, we are letting a lot of waste. Be it plastics, the packaging, and unjudicious use of resources. We have seen the case of polythene bags. These were not very free. This packaging was available. So how unjudiciously we use these resources. Now, consumption is the key to understanding policy challenges as they focus on the demand side. So in order to kickstart sustainable development, we do not only have to talk about production. We ask the companies to reduce emissions. We ask the governments to reduce emissions. We also have to educate our consumers. We have to notice the demand patterns, and then we have to align the production with the consumption. Examining consumption patterns reveals what is being consumed and whether it is meeting the basic needs of the people. Who is consuming what? Okay, and if I have 10 target communities, I get to know their food consumption or energy consumption. I can easily manage that this person. It's as simple as that. At home also, you know that this person is, taking this much rupees from me. So if one has got 4 or 5 children, he can actually equally distribute the resources, he or she. So similarly, we have to manage the resources. We have to see who is not having access to resources and who is having more access, so that it is problematic at both the ends. So consumption patterns need to be evaluated, need to be studied. Poor not only consume less, but also pollute less. But they are directly affected if the environment is degraded. Now just imagine, if floods happen, what happens? Poor people get affected. They are homeless. They die. They suffer from ailments. People who are already having money, they live in pakka houses, okay, and they have money to manage their ailments. They do not get infections, so they have all kinds of resources to meet their ends. So whatever happens, any disaster, any environmental pollution, it is the vulnerable communities who will get impacted more. For example, from the pollution itself, poor people, those who are not able to breathe in the clean air will be impacted. They do not have money, they do not have nutrition to take care of themselves. So, even amongst the males and females, it has been found through research that females, in fact, get more impacted by these disasters. Consumption patterns mainly depict problematic relationships among economic growth and the satisfaction of basic needs and aspirations. Now, sustainable development, we talked about the consumption side. Now we talk about the production side. Use of materials and processes that cause environmental degradation and health hazards. So we do not have to use those materials. Inefficiency of process which causes system losses and environmental degradation. Failure to detect negative externalities in product cost. So we have to see that how we are producing, what kind of policies government is preparing. Energy, water, fertilizer subsidies, which mainly benefit the non-poor. Transaction cost. So we have to see all these production related factors, and also there are distribution factors. If our distribution is not aligned properly, then also resource loss and wastage will happen. So in a kind of sustainable system could be at the regional level, at the local level, at the farming level, at an energy system level also. So sustainable system is where we maximize income while maintaining constant or increasing stock of capital, maintain the ecological balance as well, and also the socio-cultural approach, so that all the poor, there is no divide. We talk about energy divide, digital divide. All these resources should be equally distributed amongst the people. That is what is called sustainable development. That means we all grow together. So we all have access to resources. Right now it is divide, and sustainable development goals, they are an effort to bridge that divide, to reduce our resource consumption, to understand our consumption patterns, right? So sustainability requires that the scale of human activities stays within the environmental carrying capacity. Every system has a particular carrying capacity. If we go beyond that, we are pressurizing the system. For example, if a room has space for 20 students, okay, we take a class, okay, it's fine. Then we allow 5 more students to sit in that room. Obviously, we will have to open the door and the window. 30, 40, 50. Imagine if that room, which is having a carrying capacity of 25 people to be seated and we put 50 students in that room, what is the kind of impact we will have? We will not be able to breathe fresh air. We will not be able to be productive. Students will not interact. Some people will be absent. So it's a very simple example, and I'm giving it to the faculty that, every system has got a particular carrying capacity. We do not have to go beyond that carrying capacity. Similarly, ecosystems also have a carrying capacity. We cannot go beyond that carrying capacity. So sustainability's first principle says that we have to be within our carrying capacity, and that has to account for the short and longer term. So we talk about a scenario which is near 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. So we talk about short term and long run, how we will manage all these resources. It's not that in our households also, we tell our children that, okay, we have to save something for the future. So it is as simple as that. Sustainability requires that we use some resources, whereas we save something for the future. So this is the principle of sustainability. The whole system is a process. Whole system is a process because we have already discussed how the three pillars, economic, environmental, and society, are related. And if we talk about businesses, there is a term that we use in businesses, triple bottom line, that John Ecklington coined. So triple bottom line means we do not only have to work about profits, we have to also worry about people and planet. So triple P, people, planet, and profit. And we have to focus on human well-being, not just saving the planet, right? So these are the principles of sustainability. That means we have to strive for, we have to see that every system is more productive. So we have to work for resource productivity, whether it is an energy system or agricultural system, or it is a forest ecosystem, or it is, an oceanic system, right? So we have to see that how, by not harming that particular Earth's carrying capacity, the planet's carrying capacity, we can increase the resource productivity. Employ regenerative energy resources and continuously recycle non-generative resources. And so this is how, the first principle says contain entropy and ensure that the flow of resources through and within the economy. I'm just skipping some of the slides to have some room for questions. In fact, the second principle, adopt an appropriate accounting system. Now, we are talking about resources, unjudicious sources of resources, but till now we had never valuated our ecosystem services, right? So we have to use accounting procedures. We have to evaluate our ecosystems. If water quality is lost, how much money we spend to replenish that water? Every system has got, every household nowadays have got RO system, and very soon we have to replace that, right? Because they say that RO also leaves the water with less minerals. It is not healthy. So we are now replacing ROs with different systems. So I am trying to raise a question like, this is an additional money that we have to spend. Now, if there is air pollution, we have to have purifiers at our home. Every government, every citizen have to spend more money in case our resources are not effective for usages, right? So why did not we account for these resources 100 years back? We went grow and grow. We went growing unsustainably, unjudiciously. So we have to have that. The moment we try to have a product, a service, we launch a product, we have to account for all the resources that we have used. A company launches a mobile phone, only talks about the plastics, only talks about the SIM card or other raw materials. But we are not talking about the water and energy and other ecosystem resources that we used to manufacture that plastic which is used in mobile phones, right? So so there's a question we have to ask ourselves, that we have to account for the water also, because water was free, we took it for granted, right? So in fact, bioorganisms, microorganisms, we are not caring about them also. Forests are also a resource, they are also a living being, right? So there is a now PIL in Uttarakhand High Court that says that we have to treat these people also as an organism. Only then we will be able to make the right usage of these. resources. The third principle, ensure that the essential diversity of all forms of life in biosphere is maintained. Yeah, the same question. So we have a responsible stewardship. You know, when I talk to my students in business sustainability class, I ask them, who are the stakeholders of business? Everyone answers: investors, shareholders, brand managers, employees, customers. You know, we are so obsessed with customers. Nobody talks about the natural resources. Who are our biggest stakeholders? Imagine a company running without any natural resource. Water, wood. Can you run a company without that? No. But we do not consider that as our stakeholders. So it is my request to all of you, when you go to your classes, talk to your students, please tell them that they are also a stakeholder, natural systems, right? So treat them as your clients, as your customers. Don't get obsessed with the product, the technology, and the customers. Everything is useless unless you treat your natural resources as the stakeholders. And we have to maintain the biodiversity. We have seen that biodiversity is getting hampered. A Millennium Ecosystem Report has already brought out the facts that, you know, how the world is losing its ecosystem, whether it is freshwater, marine ecosystems, or forest ecosystems. In India also, we have lost the species. In Australian forest fires, a lot of biodiversity loss was there. So we have to assume responsible stewardship for our planet's web of life. This is one principle of sustainability. Harvest species only to regeneration capacity. Conserve the variety of existing gene pool. And we have to shape our land use patterns to reduce human encroachment on the other forms of life, and hence biological diversity in the areas of human habitat. I was in a university in Delhi. I was working in Delhi earlier, and there was a snake. There used to come, you know, snakes to the campus. So there was a joke that they also, you know, like our classes, and they come. So not many snakes, but once a year we will find that. And they will say that, you know, he has encroached our university. No, we have encroached our life. It was a snake's habitat. You know, we have to see that how we are able to maintain a balance. We needed more, population. More population needed more resources, so we have encroached their resources as well. We have to be sensitive towards them. Fourth principle is maximize degrees of freedom and potential self-realization of all humans without any individual or group adversely affecting others. So, to cut it short, we have to be literate in sustainability. And that is why I really like the topic that Professor Rehan has chosen. Because, you know, we have to promote sustainable literacy through education at all levels. We have to teach our coming generations. We have to teach ourselves. We have to be compassionate towards society. We have to ensure equitable access to life nurturing resources, right? So I have got a signal from the hosts to conclude in another 10 minutes. So this is the fourth principle, where we talk about, you know, compassion and fifth principle, where we talk about compassion and an inclusive, comprehensive perspective in the underlying intention, motivation, and actual implementation of human endeavors. Now, these are some of the pragmatic approaches to sustainability. That means we have to live off the interest, not principle. We do not have to go beyond the carrying capacity. And we have to, whether we try to use a technology, invent a technology or product or a service, we have to use the precautionary principle. Whether we are going to do the, you know, government policies, exercise caution in adoption of new products and technologies. Study their impacts before widespread use. Maintain resilience of the overall system. How do we quantify and make decisions? So these are the decision-making challenges. Now, sustainability is not that easy. there is a lot of dilemma because sustainable decisions are interconnected through economy, environment, and social challenges. So challenges in assessing sustainability. Length of natural lifetime is unknown. We don't know. We are talking about future generations, but our ancestors could not assess our needs. Did they know that we need mobile phones? No. Did they know that we need these kinds of resources, our energy consumption to be so high? No. Wood was enough for them. They never talked about solar power, coal, and all these thermal power plants. Similarly, we don't know what our people will be needing. Needs of future generations are unknown. Carrying capacity of ecosystem is unclear. We don't know what is the carrying capacity of an ecosystem. We need to research on a particular ecosystem to know what is its carrying capacity. It is only when the glass gets filled, this is overgrown. Okay, so this has gone beyond the carrying capacity of ecosystem. So we need to adopt models where we try to project what is the actual carrying capacity of particular systems, not only ecosystems, but other systems as well. Challenges in deciding how to intervene. So sustainability, measuring sustainability is also a challenge. There are various techniques that we use. Life cycle analysis, we use water footprinting, carbon footprinting. So there are various techniques that we use in assessing sustainability, right? And then there are challenges in deciding how to intervene. If we use this BT cotton, crops, or solar energy, we are not wind. So they also leave lot of wastage, once they are not used. So we only talk about the solar energy and wind energy. It saves us resources. This is a renewable form. But we have not thought about what will happen to those panels after their usage, right? So potential for unexpected consequences needs to be known. Technological solutions such as switching to renewable resources or enhancing energy efficiency may not work. Complexity in every system is interdependent. I was talking about food, water, energy nexus, but that is a very macro perspective. At micro level, microorganisms, they are all related. Energy systems. So, energy, economy, profit, everything is related. So we have to talk about the complexity and interdependence of the systems. These are the ways to achieve sustainability. I have 3 minutes now. Mohammad Rehan Saab has already highlighted. So I think these are the ways that we use to achieve sustainability. We have to, see that how polluter and victim can arrive at efficient solution by themselves. We have to, market-based instruments, carbon trading, other things. These can actually take care of the judicious use of resources, right? Subsidies, okay? Internalize the externalities. So when we plan a particular product, we have to internalize these externalities into our system, and we have to invest in green economy. Now, quickly, I will come to sustainable development goals. This is 2030 agenda for sustainable development that the globe, 197 countries have adopted, and these were adopted at the Sustainable Development Summit on 25th of September 2015, and UN members adopted the 2030 agenda, and there are 17 goals. These global goals we are all aware, but just to talk about them very quickly, they started after the MDGs they got finished. This agreement marks an important milestone in putting our world on an inclusive and sustainable course. If we all work together, we have a chance of meeting citizens' aspirations for peace, prosperity, and well-being, and to preserve our planet. So these are 17 goals and have 169 detailed targets. First of all, they talk about universality. Universality, that means they are most important. These goals apply to every nation, every sector, every city, every business, every school, every organization, right? So this is what is called universality. So we have to, these goals are universal in nature, integrated. All the 17 goals are interconnected, right? So they are interconnected in a system. We cannot aim to achieve just one goal. We have to achieve them all. Transformation. And finally, it is widely recognized that achieving these goals involves making big fundamental changes in how we live on Earth. So that means they require a major transformation in how we consume, how we produce, how we distribute our resources. Goal number 1, end poverty in all forms everywhere. So by 2030, we have to reduce poverty at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children. Goal number 2 is about hunger, achieving food security, improve nutrition. So end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants. 3 means we all have to live healthy, right? So health is very important. We have all seen in COVID-19 pandemic. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for at all ages. We have to reduce maternal mortality ratio to less than 70. And by 2030, substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses. 4th is about inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. 5 is achieving gender equality and empower women and girls. There are targets that I have written. Ensure access to water and sanitation for all. 7 is affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So we have to ensure universal access to energy. Everyone should have energy access. So sustainable energy for all. Increases by 2030, increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. I've already shown you that by 2040, we will have 20% energy to be met by solar power. By 2030, double the rate of improvement in energy efficiency. So I've seen that there is one lecture by my colleague in this FTP also. He will talk about energy efficiency, Dr. Naki Anar. Promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth. We are also talking about sustainable industrialization, sustainable production and innovation. Reduce inequality within and among countries. Goal number 11 is about urban development. 12 is about sustainable consumption and production patterns. And then 13 about climate change. We have already talked a lot about it, and there are targets given on this slide. I'm leaving this presentation for you to have a look. And sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation, biodiversity loss. 16 is promote just, peaceful, and inclusive society. A society that got equal access to resources for all, that treats everyone with respect, with equality, reducing violence, reducing racial discrimination. And goal number 17 is revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Goal number 17 I really like because it is all about partnerships. So we have to create new partnerships. We have to innovate in terms of partnerships to see that how these goals are met. So each goal is important in itself. I have consumed my time today. So I think it's 1:30 now, 1:28 in fact. And I finish here. And I thank you all. In case you have any questions, you may ask now or you may ask me later. I will leave my email at the chat, but I can take a few questions. Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful interactive session. I now request the participants to, if you have any questions, one by one, you can either put in chat or can ask, but your question should be brief.
Yes, in case you have question, you can write. I will be able to take. I had to finish in time, so I quickly ran through some of the slides, but I hope it was interactive. I have given my email ID, so there are no questions, I guess.
Can I ask a question, Professor Nirmala?
Please do.
Thank you for your talk, and you have covered in detail various aspects of this sustainable development and the questions. So, what do you feel specifically in our country? What do you feel? How is our progress, and what kind of challenges you see?
Yeah.
And what are the opportunities exactly for us?
Okay, so yes, sustainable development goals have lot of opportunities for all of us. In fact, we have kind of adopted SDGs at the national level in India. All the states, and there is a policy document at NITI Aayog, which talks about how SDGs are implemented in India, and all the member countries need to be, participating in this. And I would like to mention here that the Government of India also has taken some initiatives, like talk about single-use plastics and renewable energy. Even access to education. So we have adopted these SDGs at all levels. And even as an organization at the university level, like the work that AMU is doing in terms of greening the campuses, we can adopt sustainable development goals. Each goal is important, and we will pick up 2 or 3 goals in order to, like, say for example, inclusive development. So at the national level, we have to reduce this, resource. We have to first tackle the emissions, our rising emissions because of our industrialization and other policies. We also have to see about that we develop an inclusive society in terms of, access of resources to all. Right now, there is a lot of divide in terms of, if we talk about digital divide or energy divide, there are still some areas where we need to work more. And education, we have to pay attention to the female education, etc. And also in terms of, goal number 2, hunger, we have a food waste to cater. So we can do a lot of work to build resilient agri-supply chains and see that our resources are used judiciously in agriculture and in water, especially in these areas. We have to also think about the quality of resources that we make available to our systems, for our citizens. For example, water, air. So we have to work on these areas. And it is a huge challenge for a country like India, because on one hand we are trying to grow, and on the other hand we are trying to curtail our emissions. So challenges are that in terms of not only production but also sustainable consumption. So I think every citizen has to take these goals at his or her level to see that they are sustainable practicing their lives. So by ignoring products which are unsustainable, by ignoring services which are unsustainable, while consuming every product or service, we have to ask ourselves whether I am doing the right thing towards sustainability goals or sustainability. How are my actions going to impact? How are my actions going to impact the future generations or the resources in my at my nation? So these are the we have to educate our citizens. This is the biggest challenge, that we have to educate our citizens, our company employees, So every decision is sustainable. So if the decisions are sustainable, the society in itself becomes sustainable. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question.
Any
Thank
other
you.
question, or should we? Any question can come to ma'am in her personal ID.
With my personal email ID, they may ask questions.
And I request, I again thank ma'am for this wonderful session you have just delivered. I thanks all the participants for joining this session. We will again join the next at the time which is mentioned 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. So please join at 3 p.m. Again, I thank you, ma'am, and thank from
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.